NICOLA Sturgeon has said she is ready to confront Theresa May over a second independence referendum in the autumn. The First Minister reminded an audience in Brussels that she had stood for election in 2016 on a manifesto referring to a referendum and therefore had a mandate for one. Ms. Sturgeon was speaking during an event with Politico magazine in the wake of a meeting with Europe's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier. She said Mrs. May's government would, sooner or later, have to concede that the UK must remain in a customs union. She said she saw it as the only credible and sustainable option for the UK after Brexit, but the UK government was only listening to mad Brexiteers, naming Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, Environment Secretary Michael Gove and Tory MP Jacob Rees-Mogg. Sturgeon, UK must concede on customs union, sooner or later, in a queue to make a call on a referendum, and what she would do if the Prime Minister again refused to allow one on the basis that now is not the time. Ms. Sturgeon replied, "In terms of the second part of your question, we will confront that at the moment that arises. I don't want to go over old ground, but I stood on a manifesto in 2016, and was elected on a manifesto that had the prospect of a second referendum in the context of Brexit, so, you know, the Scottish Government has the mandate for that." She went on, "In terms of when that clarity will emerge, what the Prime Minister is telling us is that that will be in the autumn, and that's my working assumption. Clearly, there are lots of issues that have to be resolved between now and then, but I don't hear anything from the UK government or indeed from the EU side of this negotiation that is moving away from there being a fairly detailed political statement about the future relationship in the autumn. So that remains my working assumption." Asked if she would call for a referendum at that point, Ms. Sturgeon said, "I will at that point give my view on what I think the correct thing is to do at that stage." Last June, after the SNP lost a third of its MPs in the general election, Ms. Sturgeon reset her plan for a referendum by spring 2019, saying she would set out the precise timescale for offering people a choice over the country's future in autumn of this year instead. The Scottish Parliament voted last year in support of a Section 30 order transferring the temporary power to hold a referendum to Holyrood, but Mrs. May refused to grant it. New SNP website prompts claim a fresh referendum campaign. She would almost certainly do the same again if Ms. Sturgeon made a fresh request, especially as the Tory government is now reliant on the DUP. However, a refusal could still be useful to the SNP in the run-up to the 2021 Holyrood election, when it could be cited as evidence of Westminster insensitivity to Scotland. Ms. Sturgeon also discussed the SNP Growth Commission report which came out last week, and has provoked a fierce backlash from the left of the Yes movement. Authored by corporate lobbyist Andrew Wilson, the report recommended a decade of tight public spending to have Scotland's deficit, and an informal use of sterling as a currency. Ms. Sturgeon said so-called sterlingization, rather than a formal currency union of the type the SNP proposed in 2014, would not be the same as Panama using the US dollar, because Scotland already used the pound, and would carry on using it in that scenario. Mark Smith, the two shaky planks in the SNP report that make a yes vote less likely, she said. The report is a set of recommendations. The SNP has to consider them and deliberate and come to a view. In the last referendum, we proposed a currency union, but it gave our opponents a political veto. We look forward to debating the report's recommendations over the next few months." Asked about an independent Scotland using the euro, a long-term option briefly referred to in the Commission report, she said, "It's not my party's position to have Scotland go into the euro, and I don't envisage that changing.